Good morning. So good to be here with you. I'm sorry for the circumstances, but it's always wonderful to worship with God's people. I was born into a Navy family. My dad was a submariner, so we lived a lot of places growing up. And when I was 12, my family moved from South Carolina to Virginia. And let me tell you, moving at 12, it was devastating for me. And I took it with the full emotion of a 12-year-old girl. I swore I would never make friends, I would never get involved in anything. I would prove to my parents that they had completely and totally ruined my life. I was doing really well sticking to my plan, but I had had a South Carolina education in the early 1990s, and it was not the best education. And moving to Virginia, I did not know a lot of things. I had an English teacher who noticed that I was really struggling in a lot of ways, and she called my parents, and she arranged for me to stay after school twice a week to get extra tutoring so that I would get caught up. She said that my education had been like Swiss cheese, and I had a bunch of holes that needed filling. Now, Mrs. Corbin was a tiny woman, very quiet, very unassuming, but she loved English. Every afternoon I spent with her, she saw where I was struggling, and she helped me to understand what I didn't. Because of her, I began to become involved in the literature magazine at our middle school, make friends, and do all those things I swore I would not do. After I left middle school, I confess I never spoke to or saw Miss Corbin again. But I think about her often. I thought of her when I declared my major in undergraduate as English. I thought of her as I wrote papers in seminary. I frequently think of her as I watch my children love to read and grasp the nuances of English language. Miss Corbin demanded nothing from me. She spent those many, many hours with me when she could have been with family, she could have been doing something she enjoyed, or she could have been reading a good book. But without the time that she invested in me, my life would have been drastically different. I'm dyslexic, something that I didn't discover until college. And what I've learned is that many people with dyslexia don't learn to write well or to love reading. I know that had I not had Miss Corbin in my life, I would have been dragged under by my deficiencies. Because she took time and patience, she helped me understand where I could go and what I could do. When I read our passage from today, I automatically think of Miss Corbin. Those who sow sparingly will reap sparingly, and those who sow bountifully will reap bountifully. I do not know what Miss Corbin reaped in life, but I do know that she sowed generously. Now, this example, we have to think about it as farming in ancient Israel. And farming in ancient Israel was not easy. Not only did they lack the kind of farming equipment that we have today, water was not easy to come by, and the terrain is not really suitable for grain crops. In order to reap enough grain to live off of, a farmer had to throw a lot of seed. Much of that seed was wasted. It was eaten by birds, it was washed away, it was planted among weeds. If you sowed only what you hoped to gain back, you would have a bad harvest. But if you sowed 2 or 3 or 4 times the amount of seed that you hoped to get, then you would have enough grain for the next season. And you would have enough grain, hopefully, to give away to those who didn't have enough. When Paul writes this to the church in Corinth, he is reminding them of a promise that they made, a promise to support the church in Jerusalem. It was a big deal for the churches that Paul planted to support the church in Jerusalem, because the churches like Corinth that Paul planted were comprised mainly of Gentiles. They were Gentile Christians. But the church in Jerusalem was mainly a Jewish Christian church. During this time, when Paul was encouraging the churches that he knew to give to the church in Jerusalem, there was a division within the leadership of the church, whether Christians were supposed to keep all of the Jewish laws in addition to the laws of Christ, or if the Jewish laws could be completely dismissed and all they had to do was follow Jesus and his teachings. By encouraging Gentile Christians to support a Jewish congregation, Christian congregation, Paul was hoping to overcome some of the divides that were beginning to show within the church, to show that all Christians, regardless of whether they were Jew or Gentile, were supporting one another with the grace that they had received from God. Paul reminds them that in giving to support others' needs, it is a reflection of their understanding of God's abundance in their lives. The amount and the way we give says something to the world about our understanding of God's grace. Paul is reminding the Corinthians, as well as us, that giving out of obligation or in the hopes that our works will somehow save us is a misunderstanding of why we are called to give. Paul teaches that the attitude with which we give is as important as the gift itself. Each one of you must give as you have made up your mind to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. He tells us a cheerful giver reaps every blessing of abundance. A cheerful giver reaps every blessing of abundance. Now, this doesn't just mean that we smile as we're doling out gifts, but this means that we are cheerful in the center of our heart, that we are aware of the grace and the goodness by which God has given us. And out of that grace and goodness, we are compelled to give to others. Think of what a difference it makes when someone is cheerful. Think of what a difference it makes in your day when someone just smiles at you or gives you a genuine compliment. It doesn't take much for us to be cheerful givers. John Wesley, when he was 22, was at Oxford, and he was one of the more popular students. He was witty, he was smart, he was a good scholar, he was a little bit arrogant. But when he was 22, he had a conversation with the porter of the house that he lived in. And in having the conversation, he noticed that the porter's coat had a large hole in it. And John Wesley said to him, "Go home and get another coat." Like, the porter's coat was embarrassing to Wesley, who was a student there, that he felt like, this porter should be more dignified, have better clothing. And the porter told him, "This is the only coat I have in the world, and I thank God for it." Wesley said to him, "Well, go home and get your supper." The porter said, "I have nothing today but a drink of water, and I thank God for that." Wesley says, "It is late, you will be locked out, and then what will you have to thank God for?" "I will thank him that I have dry stones to lie upon." Wesley wrote in his journal after this encounter, "John, you thank God when you have," he replied to the porter, "You thank God when you have nothing to wear, nothing to eat, no bed to lie upon. What else do you thank him for?" The porter replied, "I thank him that he has given me my life and being, a heart to love him, a desire to serve him." This is the blessing of abundance that we receive. Our life and being, a heart to love, a desire to serve God. The blessing of abundance we receive when we sow generously is a profound love of God that continues to grow regardless of our circumstances, where in any circumstance we can find even the smallest thing a blessing of God's grace. And as we share our love, as we give grace to others, so God's grace continues to grow in us. The most Wesleyan question I think that there is, are you going on to perfection? And Wesley took this very seriously. Are you going on to perfection, he would ask. Not, are you perfect yet? But are you going on, is your goal perfect, to be perfect? Not perfect in your actions, not perfect in your thoughts, not perfect in what you do, but perfect in your love of God and your love of your neighbor. Are we striving every day to become more perfect? Because that is where we find the blessing of abundance. In this life, we don't always, or very often, see the harvest that comes from what we plant. I dare say every one of us here today can name the Miss Corbin in their lives. That person who through their gift to us, their generosity to us, shaped our lives in ways that have made us have more to give. The thing about these generous givers is that we rarely see the gift they give us until it is too late to shower them with thanks and praise. When we sow in the world, we don't know what will happen to the seeds we scatter. We don't know if they're going to fall on rocks, if they're going to be eaten by birds, or if they're going to be planted and take root and produce a harvest. Very often in life, the gifts that we have to give are gifts that someone else is going to come along and reap. But if we don't plant those seeds, then no one reaps. If the seeds aren't planted, then nothing will grow. God promises a harvest. We are promised an abundance, a harvest that is abundant. We are called and we are equipped with grace to be one part of the cycle that leads to abundant life. Amen. During this time, I would invite you to reflect on the sermon, and there will be questions on the screen.